Hi everyone, I'm just back from Death of a Unicorn, which is that unicorn thing, a very, very, very bad film, which I'm going to say is bad. I really wanted this channel to be about celebrating cinema. I want to love the films I see. This film is poor, and it's not poor because the actors are bad, though Richard E. Grant is phoning it in to a degree I haven't seen in decades. Even from him, I'm sorry, but bad because the script is bad, bad because the idea wasn't very good in the first place, bad because the whole aesthetic of the film is a bit cringe, bad because the ending is bad, bad. And I think it's bad for interesting reasons, and I think it's bad in ways that are instructive, and I think A24 has got to take some responsibility for this. Maybe it'll do really well at the box office because it's got young bankable stars as well as older comforting presences like Paul Rudd. Maybe it'll do well at the box office because everyone wants to know what the unicorn's going to look like. It's cleverly titled because it does just what it says on the box. A unicorn does die, but ultimately I think it's going to damage their reputation. This is the story, and then I'm going to tell you why I think the story doesn't work. The story is, and I won't give away too much, I mean, the title tells you the biggest thing you need to know, and the trailer tells you most of the rest. Paul Rudd is trying to bond with his daughter, who's played by Jenna Ortega, and she is great, by the way. I mean, she's got nothing to do in this film except act out the by numbers little gestures of a stereotype. That's all she's allowed to do, but that's all anyone's allowed to do in the film. But she is a wonderful screen presence, playing the daughter of a man they've recently lost. He's lost his wife. She's lost her mother. He's now going to try to make a living for both of them to secure their financial future. By going to work for a rich family as their lawyer, their in-house lawyer. It's never made that clear why it would be so important that it's just him. I mean, he's not part of a team. It's really not that clear. But they're driving through the grand estate of this wealthy family when they hit what under normal circumstances would be a deer, possibly, or a horse maybe, but is actually, guess what, a unicorn. And it's discovered, as the trailer will already have told you, that the horn of the unicorn has extraordinary healing properties. And it actually heals Richard E. Grant, who's suffering from cancer in the film. As the film progresses, the mother or father unicorn appears to avenge the taking of the child, and that's set against the backdrop of those famous and beautiful tapestries that are on show in New York, the medieval unicorn tapestries, in which I think they're French in origin, correct me if I'm wrong, and we see a unicorn being tamed by a pure-hearted young maiden, Jenna Ortega, because everyone's a stereotype. And that's what then happens in the rest of the film, more or less. There's a slight development in Act 3 of the film about the nature of the unicorn, which was obvious from the start of the film. In fact, it's the whole premise of the film from about 10 minutes in. So the plot isn't that interesting. Effectively, the unicorn is just a velociraptor with a horn instead of with claws. And the claws are honestly more frightening than the horn. Every time the horn starts glowing, literally a thing it repeatedly does in the course of the film, you think, oh, here we go. I mean, it's just the phallic symbolism, and everything about it is so crass. But it's not just that, it's that just because it's a unicorn and we haven't seen one of those on screen before in this way doesn't mean you can just play out a traditional by numbers monster movie through the whole middle part of the film without doing anything interesting with it. You know, if we're going to have a rich old guy who wants to make lots of money, maybe he should have just one interesting thing about him as a person. You can't get away with just casting Richard E. Grant and think that's interesting in itself. When this archetype first appeared in pop culture, I suppose, well, that would be in Frankenstein, but let's say Jurassic Park, you know, that character was somewhat layered. John Hammond had that whole speech about a flea circus that he set up when he was a youngster, and the idea that the dinosaurs are kind of evolutions of this fantasy of his was quite moving. I mean, at least there was a gesture towards something human, whereas in this film, everyone is reduced back to the simplest version of themselves. Even the unicorns. I mean, you're waiting for the unicorns to become interesting, and actually, all that happens is about halfway through they start snarling. And you're like, oh, okay, it's bad unicorn time. I'd rather see Cocaine Bear, honestly. I kind of loved that movie. That was a more interesting take on a deranged animal than an angry unicorn is ever going to be. I mean, you would think it would be so interesting, but what you see in the trailer is what you get. Occasionally, the unicorn bares its teeth. There are a series of there's Will Poulter as the son of Richard E. Grant, who, surprise, surprise, he's the son of a wealthy man, so he's a spoilt, self-important, reckless, ethics-free prick. And you know what? That's probably true to life. But at the same time, I was like, okay, how long do I have to sit through these cliches? There's a very slight sense in which the film begins to defy that because both Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega are so good. They make the most of what they've been given. Paul Rudd has to find his conscience and fight for his daughter. You don't say. I guess the thing is, and you know, what I'm saying is he does do that quite well, but why is he being asked to do something so trivial? There are some interesting special effects, sort of, around some of the visions that the unicorns kind of provoke in some of the characters. But ultimately, this film is so secondhand, so warmed over, that I kept expecting it just to collapse like an overcooked meringue. And, or maybe meringues, when they're overcooked, maybe they turn very solid. It was very, very solid. I felt like I was banging my head against a wall all the way through this film. Not just that, but I think it signifies, and this is what I'll finish with, a deeper problem about where A24 goes as a studio. Because they've always walked that borderline between the commercial and the experimental. And some of their breakout stars like Ari Aster are people who do that with tremendous skill. And the reason I think that they have that skill is because they are extremely careful about the balance between the underlying familiar structure of a generic tale and what they do with it on the surface, how the characters are developed, how the cinematography or the choice of, I mean, Ari Aster's camera moves so beautifully. It's like an amphibian. It moves in and out of different spaces and modes and zones so fluently, whereas this film, there was a kind of clumsy theatrical blocking element that kept happening. Like, even if you've seen the trailer, you'll remember that bit where Will Poulter is standing there and they're all looking down at the camera and he's saying, I don't think I should be in swim shorts for this. And it's all a bit like that, like stagey. So it doesn't have the fluency or the nuance that Ari Aster brings to the warmed over generic tropes that he also uses. And you could say exactly the same for a number of other leading directors right now, like Robert Eggers, who, you know, there's just something about the way he uses the camera. There's something about the inky darkness of Nosferatu's castle that is really evocative. Whereas this film, really in the end, it relies for its effects on just visceral episodes of pointless violence. So I think what's happening here is A24 is trying to sell us a poorly made genre piece, as if by being poorly made, it was somehow a comment on genre. And I don't think it works. Sorry, that's kind of mean. I wish the director well, but we have to think carefully about what studios like A24 are going to do, because clearly they're surviving in an extremely competitive marketplace, and all the temptation is there to kind of do what any studio would do to make money. But they have to remember that their USP is that they don't quite do that. It's a tightrope walk, and this time they fell off. Thank you so much.